2024, 3 films came out. Obviously not only 3 films the entire year, but these are basically the most important ones. Frank Darabont's The Shawshank Redemption, Quentin Tarantino's Pulp Fiction, and Robert Zemeckis' Forrest Gump. They all came out in October, they all got nominated for Best Picture, they're all around 2.5 hours long, and least down the line they'd all be in the IMDB top 10. Until recently, where Forrest Gump was kicked out to number 11. Now, years later, actually over 30 years later, these are seen as the movies of 1994. And I think the main glue connecting them is that all these films are basically just a series of vignettes. Pulp Fiction is obvious, it's split into 3 stories: Vincent Vega, Marcellus Wallace's wife, the gold watch, and the Bonnie situation. Shawshank Redemption and Forrest Gump are a little less obvious. I'm not going to go too in-depth in explaining why they're still a series of vignettes, because I think most people still agree. Seriously, just think for a moment. What is the overarching plot of The Shawshank Redemption, or the overarching plot of Forrest Gump? The Shawshank Redemption is just a series of vignettes. It simply is. There's the bit with Tommy, then the entire Brooks here section, which, by the way, makes me sob every single time. The thing about The Shawshank Redemption, about how it's simply a series of vignettes, and you just have to agree with me, also applies to Forrest Gump. I mean, Forrest Gump, like the Vietnam War section, the bit where he becomes famous for running for some reason, and the part where he meets with Jenny again for the 1700th time. Yeah, I do think that is the main glue that makes this become a trilogy of sorts. And I'm just now realizing I should have made this video last year. God damn it. Oh well, I'm making the video now, and you will enjoy it. Okay, I'm gonna be really honest off the bat. The Shawshank Redemption is my favourite movie. I'm recording July 22nd, which is my birthday, and I'm gonna rewatch it in a few hours to celebrate. And this is recording me, jumping in from the future, so that I'm recording this July 23rd. So yes, I am recording this, and yes, most of this segment was written after I'd rewatched it, but the first part isn't. I think it is a perfect and uplifting movie. It has one of my favourite endings of all time, even if the cynic in me will always lead me to believe that I prefer the sad/bittersweet endings, which is why I slightly prefer the ending of Logan the 7 to this one. But still, the reveal where the warden just gets mad and then tosses the rock at the poster, then slowly realises it's just such perfection. I love it so much every time. I also think the ending is perfectly set up and it all makes sense and it all clicks together. It's so perfect. I think Andy and Red are some of the most perfectly written characters ever put to screen. And when I rewatched it today/yesterday, some of the side characters really stuck out to make it better before. Brooks always stuck out to me because of the Brooks was here sequence, but other than that, I always didn't really think of him. And I still think that is by far his best scene, exclusively because that is his purpose. By which I mean his purpose in the movie mostly comes after he dies, because it's what Andy and Red really don't want to become the entire time afterwards. But this time, I really thought he was a likeable and interesting character even before that. Even other characters I've never given a second thought before, like Hayward. This time, I found him pretty funny. I also think this has by far the best narration in film history. Red's narration becomes a character in itself. It connects all the titular vignettes into the film past having the same characters. And yes, I do think the decision to have a 100% happy ending just works. Because it would be so very easy to have the bittersweet ending where Andy got out but Red's still in jail and is missing him. Or the other bittersweet ending where Red's on the way but we don't know if he ever gets there or not. But the fully happy ending of them reunited on the island is so much more satisfying, both for the film and also to the themes of the film. This is my favourite movie and I don't think that's going to change anytime soon. This is another one of my favourite movies, and it easily cracks my top 4, which is crazy because it isn't even my favourite Tarantino movie. My Tarantino ranking when you finish this video is really good, and I put a ton of work into it. This, like I said earlier, has by far the most obvious use of vignettes. It's the only one that just puts a title screen for every new vignette. It also has the longest vignettes, by far. It only has 3 vignettes the entire movie. Which, in addition to the fact that this is the longest out of the 3, being 2 hours and 40 minutes, when Shawshank Redemption and Forrest Gump were actually both 2 hours and 22 minutes. Before the first vignette, Vincent Vega and Marcellus Wallace's wife, it had the opening scene with Pumpkin and Honey Bunny, then the opening credits, then they hit on Bread. So with all that combined, about 20 minutes before the vignettes, leaving roughly 45 minutes per segment. Of course, that isn't exact or anything, they do vary a bit in runtime. Anyway, that's what matters for Pulp Fiction. This wasn't really a review like the name of the chapter promised, so I'm sorry. But I did review this movie literally last video, so cut me some slack, man. So if you want to hear my thoughts more in depth, go check that out. I put a ton of work into it. And for the record, my favourite vignette in this movie changed by the hour, but right now I'm feeling Vincent Vega, Marcellus Wallace's wife. I think it's just so fun, even though if you ask me again in 20 minutes, my answer will probably be different. Anyway, on to Forrest Gump. Yeah, I'm so excited for this. Okay, let me just say, I am so sorry. I am so sorry. But I simply can't help it. I f***ing hate Forrest Gump. Both the movie and the character. I despise every second of it. Every vignette is boring and 50% of them are Jenny shows up, Jenny and Ford spend a night together, yay, happy, but then she has to go, oh no, sad. And watching the same thing over and over again in gradually varying different ways got so repetitive, it nearly killed me. Internally, it probably did kill me, actually. But it genuinely happened so many times in this movie, it is slightly concerning how non-original Robert Zemeckis got. I hate Forrest, I hate Jenny, I hate Laugh is like a box of chocolates, and I hate this lady for validating Forrest and giving him an audience. The only good part of this movie is Lieutenant Dan, but he doesn't really get that much screen time. Because of course it's the well-written one who has the minimal amount. And it fundamentally pisses me off to my core that out of these three films, this is the one that won Best Picture. Out of Shawshank Redemption, the film with some of the best themes of all time, that was also the underdog here, we'll get to that in a moment. Pulp Fiction, one of the most influential films of all time, that was also so insanely original. And even Four Weddings and a Funeral, which isn't on the level of Shawshank or Pulp Fiction, but is still a really clever comedy. And Forrest Gump won. The generic, sentimental, popular, Oscar bait movie won. If you can't tell, it seriously annoys me. It should be labelled a crime that in one of, if not the best year for films in history, one of the worst films of the year is the one that won Best Picture. It boils my blood and Jenny deserved it. God, this movie angers me more than it has any right to. God. The Shawshank Redemption was based on a book called Rita Hayworth and the Shawshank Redemption. It was written by Stephen King. Yes, the Stephen King. Well, I mean, what other Stephen Kings are there? And I am very embarrassed to say that I have never read it. I do really want to read it. Not only because I love the film, but also because I love Stephen King. But I just kinda haven't. The book was released in 1982 as a part of the collection Different Seasons. Because if you don't know, Rita Hayworth and the Shawshank Redemption is actually a novella, not a novel. And Stephen King fairly regularly releases huge collections of short stories that have a novella in there. For example, I own The Skeleton Crew, which is where The Mist was first released. Anyway, Different Seasons sold alright, not as good as Stephen King's other work, but it sold just fine. It did chart on the New York Times bestsellers list, but it never hit #1. Sounds great. I mean, I know we would all be really excited and happy if our book hit the New York Times bestsellers list, but this is Stephen King we're talking about. Changing topic real quick, I assure you we'll very quickly get back to the main topic. Stephen King has a thing called the Dollar Baby deal. It's basically that he lets aspiring filmmakers adapt his short stories for only $1. This obviously doesn't apply to commercially released films. And in 1980, 2 years before the release of Rita Hayworth and the Shawshank Redemption, Frank Darabont, at this point 21 years old and unknown, adapted Stephen King's short story called Woman in the Room under this deal. King absolutely loved it. In fact, he loved it so much he actually remembered Darabont's name. And because he loved it so much, years later, in the late 80s or early 90s, around us that time, Darabont asked King for the rights to Rita Hayworth and the Shawshank Redemption, just commercially this time. And because King loved his earlier projects, he said yes. Darabont made the deal for $5,000. He then started writing the script around 1992. And apparently this crazy guy wrote the script in 8 weeks. The script was also apparently about 170 pages. If you can't tell, Darabont really loved the novel. Rob Reiner, who rose to fame from directing Stand By Me, offered to pay Darabont $2.5 million to direct the script. Apparently, Rob Reiner's idea was to cast Tom Cruise as Andy and Harrison Ford as Red. Thank God that never happened. Just because Morgan Freeman is too perfect as Red, even if Harrison Ford wouldn't have been the worst thing in the world. But Tom Cruise as Andy, though, genuinely sounds like one of the worst casting moves of all time. But it isn't unlikely that I'm biased because I love the final product so much. But obviously, Darabont, being the GOAT, turned the deal down to direct it himself. Which is especially crazy when you remember that Rob Reiner was an established director and Frank Darabont at this point was still a fucking nobody. Knowing that Tom Cruise could have played Andy will keep me up at night for the rest of my days. There's also a bit of extra biases in me because I'm not that big a fan of Stand By Me. I think it's terrible, I just think it has some structural issues and it's pretty forgettable. But yeah, no, that cast just isn't great. And I think if we had gotten Rob Reiner's The Shawshank Redemption, it would have just gone down as another mid-arse Stephen King adaptation. Instead of being the absolute cult classic and masterpiece it is today. It seriously goes to show how dedicated Darabont is to a craft that he denied $2.5 million for the love of the game as a nobody. Anyway, Tim Robbins was cast around mid-1993. Tom Cruise was not the only person that offered the role, so here's some other ones. Kevin Costner, who was interested but had to do Waterland instead. Nicolas Cage, Johnny Depp, and Charlie Sheen were also in the mix somewhere. And, oh my god, you guys aren't going to believe this. Tom Hanks was also offered the part but turned it down to do Forrest Gump. Life works in funny ways, and it scares me quite a bit. In the original book, Red was white, so the studio was actually considering a few other actors, including Robert Duvall, Gene Hackman, and Clint Eastwood. Darabont suggested Morgan Freeman, saying he was perfect other than the race. The studio resisted for a good while, but then Morgan Freeman read the script and thought it was one of the best ever written. To the surprise of absolutely no one, one of the deciding factors that got Morgan Freeman's cast was his voice. Because, honest to God, his voice is magical and I could listen to it for the rest of time and my life and I would never get bored of it. I think it's just a rumor, so take it with a grain of salt. This narration apparently wasn't nearly as present in the original script. It was there, just not as prevalent. But because Morgan Freeman's voice was so good for narration, a lot of it was added in, and I am so happy. And casting these two were one of the best decisions ever made. And I'm just now realizing that the entire segment glazing this movie. Oh well, this movie deserves that. Anyway, no better time to present than to beg you to subscribe to my channel, follow me on Letterboxd, and follow me on Blue Sky. Links will all be in the description. Pulp Fiction was Tarantino's sophomore film. It was also the follow-up to his surprisingly successful heist film Reservoir Dogs. And this is going to be very interesting because I know a lot about this movie's production. Because I recently watched a 90-minute video on this movie and how it was made by Presently Soap. It's excellent and you should go watch it. I also watched Brody Deschanel's The Legacy of Pulp Fiction. Those should be in the cards above. Basically every single goddamn studio part on this movie. And if you know literally anything about this movie, you'll be able to guess why. Because it's violent.
Oh, man, I shot Marvin in the face. Why the f did you do that? Well, I didn't mean to do it. It was an accident.
The main scene with the Marvin in the car scene, the one you just saw. Nowadays, the scene's pretty tame, but it was different back then for two reasons. The first being that it was 1994 and people were just more sensitive, and the second being that this scene was actually much bloodier in the script. Because unlike in the film, in the script, Vincent accidentally shoots Marvin in the neck, then kills him by blowing his head off with a mercy bullet. John Travolta said that audiences would turn against Vincent if he shot Marvin on purpose at all, so suggested that instead Vincent just blew Marvin away accidentally with a single bullet. And studios were not happy about it, which honestly I can kind of understand, but one and only one would take them, being Miramax, also known as the devil himself, Harvey Weinstein. Yeah, you know his deal now, but at the time he was the only person who would take the movie. You have no idea how much I hate the fact that this man is involved in this movie's DNA. But at this time, Miramax had just been taken over by the mouse, so now they had to convince Disney to take Pulp Fiction. And surprisingly, the CEO at the time, Jeffrey Katzenberg, said this: "Easy on the heroin scene if you can, but that is one of the best scripts I've ever read. Even though you don't need it, you have my blessing." With this in mind, they went to the casting process. And it is crazy how I don't think a single cast member has a boring story. Other than Ving Rhames, he just kind of wanted to avoid being typecast. We thought that playing the character to get the brutal essay Gimp scene would help him. Anyway, I'm pretty sure we all know the story of how John Travolta's career started. How he was a legend in the 70s, spent the 80s going downhill. Then he was in this movie and became a top 5 actor in the 90s. Yeah, we all know it. Did you know that originally Tarantino wanted the late and great Michael Madsen for the role, but he had to turn it down? I think because of Madsen's recent tragic death, more people know about that now, like a lot more people. But the part I didn't know, and that most people didn't know, that the studio wanted Daniel Day-Lewis after they found out Michael Madsen couldn't do it. God, what would he do for that role? Just go around shooting people and doing heroin? I don't know, John Travolta was much better anyway. Probably. Samuel L. Jackson was instantly cast, and then the guy who ended up playing Paul says, "Yo, can I try for Jules?" Shrugged and said, "Sure." And he gave an incredible audition. So Tarantino, blown away, says, "That's it, you're Jules now." And soon enough, word got back to Samuel L. Jackson, and he was having absolutely fucking none of it. So he auditioned and gave, apparently, the best audition of all time. Suffice to say, he got 2 things: the role back, and a ton of aura. Uma Thurman was initially very hesitant to audition, mainly because of her crime boss husband's brutal essay Gimp scene, but eventually Tarantino convinced her to agree, though he still wasn't sure whether or not she was his Mia Wallace. So they had a full evening together over dinner. By the end, Tarantino was 100% convinced that she was his Mia Wallace. But then Uma didn't. So once again, Tarantino had to talk her back into it. And eventually, once again, Uma Thurman agreed. And that's how we eventually got our Mia Wallace. Now, Bruce Willis has a very interesting story. As I'm sure most of you know, this movie only had an $8.5 million budget, very small. At this time, Bruce Willis was a massive star, riding off the high of multiple movies, but particularly Die Hard. So how on God's green earth did Bruce Willis get into this movie? Well, this one is actually the most interesting to me. Basically boils down to this. We could tell with throwing a barbecue and Tarantino was invited. Well, guess who else was at this barbecue? I don't actually know. I'm trying to build up hype. You guys all know the answer. It was Bruce Willis. He was there. And Bruce Willis told Tarantino that he'd got the script, he'd read it, and he loved it. And he basically told Tarantino that he wanted to be in the movie no matter how small the part was and no matter how small the pay was. And at this point, Tarantino kicked himself because the cast was all done. Because at this point, Tarantino was planning to cast Matt Dillon as Butch. But then Dillon made a fatal mistake. He spent basically an entire night about the role. So Tarantino gave the role of Butch to Bruce. Safe to say that, once again, Bruce Willis was absolutely thrilled. Somehow I still have more to say about this movie, because Weinstein's philosophy of festivals is like this. He'd show it at one festival, then bar anyone from seeing it till the next festival. Repeat. And it worked. It made a ton of hype. Now it's time for the stories of true legend. Because at one point during the Mia Wallace overdose scene, someone passed out and started having a seizure. Don't worry, he was fine. But it was pretty obvious the movie was a little too intense for him. This was brief because it is a very famous story, but that is a thing, and it did happen, and it's pretty crazy. What's even crazier, that after having a seizure because of the movie, the guy still went back and finished it. Anyway, we've got another story. This one's really interesting. If you don't know, the Cannes Film Festival is a French film festival, and there they have an award for Best Picture for the best film that premieres there. And Pulp Fiction was nominated. However, no one thought it would win for a few reasons. The existence of a movie called 3 Colors Red. Now, this movie was by a director called Krzysztof Kowalski. I butchered that name so bad, and I'm so sorry, but I just can't pronounce it. Anyway, he's a French filmmaker, and that tends to help at French film festivals. He announced it would be his final film. So, final nail in the coffin. Everyone was expecting it to win. But then Pulp Fiction won. That's already famous. That's not the most famous bit. Because the really famous bit is when Tarantino went up on stage and a French woman yelled at the top of her lungs that Pulp Fiction was which point Tarantino threw up a very giddy middle finger. Honestly, that is pretty iconic and very, very based. Still can't believe Pulp Fiction gave someone a seizure. What a goddamn world, man. Like The Shawshank Redemption, Forrest Gump was based on a book. The book, unlike Shawshank, had the exact same name as the movie. It was written by the late Winston Groom in 1986, and it made a bidding war before it was even officially published. Somehow, I have no idea how that happened. Like Shawshank, I haven't actually read the book, but unlike Shawshank, I'm not embarrassed about it. Groom was eventually paid $350,000. That is insane. Especially because I'm pretty sure this was Groom's first big novel. Like, it was his 5th novel overall, and I wouldn't be surprised if his first ones were big when they came out. I just don't know about it. But as far as I'm aware, and I didn't do much research into it, this was his first big book. So how the f did this happen? Groom also wrote the first 3 drafts of the script. These drafts stayed true to the novel. Because, again, unlike Shawshank, the book has substantial differences. Like, apparently, Forrest swears and smokes in the book. Maybe it's a good thing the movie was so different. But then studios weirdly lost interest for a while. Until 1992, Reservoir Dogs had been released and Paramount hired Eric Roth to write the script. And by the end of the year, Eric Roth had finished the script and given it to Paramount. Earlier draft, Curious George, yes, the cartoon character, was in the movie. Zemeckis had that cut for tone reasons. It wouldn't have taken a genius to figure that one out. Now, time for initial castings, and the main one here blew my mind, because all these films seem to just magically weave together. The runners-up and less interesting ones were these: Bill Murray, Chevy Chase, Sean Penn, and Matthew Broderick. Those were the runners-up, and those ones aren't interesting, you know, just generic casting options. This one is gonna blow your mind. The #1 most considered person for the role of Forrest Gump who didn't get it was John f***ing Travolta. And he turned it down to be in Pulp Fiction. And this blew my mind, not just because he was in Pulp Fiction, even though that was definitely a big part of it, also because at this point, John Travolta's career was dead. Because he didn't become relevant again till he was in Pulp Fiction. The studio was insanely resistant to his casting in that movie, so how did he end up being #1 on the list for a project as big as Forrest Gump? It's like that one Spider-Man meme. John Travolta turned down Tom Hanks' role in Pulp Fiction, and Tom Hanks rejected Tim Robinson's role in The Shawshank Redemption. I mean, was Morgan Freeman considered for Jaws in Pulp Fiction at this point? No, the answer is no. No one from Shawshank Redemption considered for Pulp Fiction, but still. Anyway, Tom Hanks read Roth's script for an hour and a half, and apparently Tom Hanks was initially hesitant to the strong southern accent, but Zemeckis talked him into it. And that's kind of all I have for this movie. This section was way shorter than the other two, and I think that was for a couple of reasons. A, that I don't like talking about this movie, sorry. But the main reason is that there just wasn't that much to say. With Shawshank and Pulp Fiction, there was a ton of behind-the-scenes info that was really fun to talk about. But this one was kind of boring, just a standard film production. I mean, the John Travolta thing was the only thing I found really interesting. But that might be because of my average dislike of this movie, who knows? Shawshank Redemption released in October 1994. It actually wasn't a wide release, only a limited one. It had a wider release in early 1995 post-Oscars. Tragically, like legitimately tragically, this movie bombed. It made $16 million on a budget of $25 million. I don't think you realize just how disastrous that is. You probably think the movie needs to make $25 million to break even, right? Well, no, it isn't that simple. That would already be a $9 million loss, which would already be bad. But it's actually worse than that, because the money is split between the cinema and the movie. Okay then, so it needs to make 2 times this budget, which meant it needed to make $50 million to break even. But still no, there's more, because that doesn't equate for marketing budget. Now, the amount they spend on marketing does vary, and they usually don't tell us, but it's usually about half the movie's budget, so we usually say that to break even, the movie needs to make 2.5 times its budget. Meaning, this movie needed to make $62.5 million, and it made $16 million. That is disastrous. That's absolutely atrocious. It's actually the only film out of the three that bombed. Considering it's the best, that is a tragedy. Now, because it's a cult classic, on re-releases it has clawed its way to $73.3 million. So it did make its money back eventually, but during its initial run, massive bomb. Now, Pulp Fiction, on the other hand, that made its money back. In fact, it made its money back and then some. It had a budget of only $8 million, which is a measly amount. And because of the festival treatment we went over earlier, as well as the word-of-mouth hype and intrigue about how violent it was, people wanted nothing more than to see for themselves what this Pulp Fiction was truly like. This meant that it made $100 million in the US Canada box office and $200 million worldwide, making for a record-breaking, absolutely insane 25 times return. Now, using our math from earlier, this meant it needed to make $20 million to break even. Everything after that is pure profit. Which means this movie made $180 million worth of profit. Now, if you adjust that for inflation, in modern money, that's $390 million, almost $400. That is already great, but remember, this is an indie film. And not just any indie film, an indie film that is by all ways against the norm. I mean, it's violent, it's gritty, it's a crime thriller. You know, the word thriller was a very good term to ignore that I said that. And it made $180 million worth of profit. Not only did this indie film become one of the most profitable movies of all time, it also kickstarted everyone's career or revived it. John Travolta's career went from in the gutter to relevant as hell. Uma Thurman and Samuel L. Jackson both got insane career boosts. A smash hit for the ages and well deserved too. Please kill me! Forrest Gump had a budget of $55 million, meaning it needed to make $137.5 million to break even. It made $678 million, meaning it made around $540 million worth of pure profit. This v Shawshank Redemption is a clear reminder that Hollywood didn't die recently. It died over 30 years ago. This movie, being such a smash hit, made its entire star-studded cast and crew an even bigger career boost. Like they needed it. It was the second highest grossing film of the entire year. The only film that beat it was Disney's The Lion King, which was the only film of that year that made over $1 billion. This made it by far the most popular out of the three films we've talked about in this video, because the popular and generic film was the most popular. The other two movies were challenging as good, and they didn't make as much, even if one of them still did well. This entire segment is making me immensely depressed, if you can't tell by my voice. Why did this movie deserve to make $500 million worth of pure profit? Furthermore, why did this deserve it when Shawshank and Pulpy didn't? The answer is it didn't. They deserved it much more. The Oscars breathed a whole new life into this movie. Before this, it quietly bombed and no one really knew about it. I mean, it was never been provided the courtesy of a full wide theatrical release. But when Oscar night came, it got 7 nominations. And they were Best Actor for Morgan Freeman, Best Editing, Best Adapted Screenplay, Best Cinematography, Best Original Score, Best Sound, and of course, Best Picture. And this movie needed these nominations. And when I say needed, I mean needed. Because when these nominations came, people actually watched the movie. Not at the cinema, by this time its theatrical run had long ended. But on TV and on DVD, people watched the movie. They were loving it. They were eating it up. Not that many people, it only grew modestly between the nomination announcement and the final night, but it was growing steadily. And then the night came, and it didn't win a single category it got nominated in. It lost Best Sound Mixing to Speed, it lost Best Original Score to The Lion King, and it lost Best Cinematography to Legend of the Fall. And everything else, Best Picture, Best Actor, Best Adapted Screenplay, and Best Film Editing, all lost to Forrest Gump. The amount of beef I have with this movie has been growing this entire video and is about to come to a climax. Luckily, this didn't stop the movie from eventually becoming a cult classic. God, I hate the Oscars. Just like the Shawshank Redemption, Pulp Fiction got 7 Oscar nominations. It got Best Picture, Best Director, Best Actor John Travolta, Best Supporting Actor for Samuel L. Jackson, Best Supporting Actress for Uma Thurman, Best Film Editing, and Best Original Screenplay. Now, Shawshank got Pulp Fiction, didn't get 100%, but it mostly got. It got 1 win for Best Original Screenplay. Uma Thurman lost Best Supporting Actor to Diana West from Bullets Over Broadway. Samuel L. Jackson lost Best Supporting Actor to Martin Landau from Ed Wood. Lost every other category to Forrest Gump. God, I hate that movie so much. I hate it more and more the more this video goes on. I already hated this movie, but the more I find out about it, the more I just want to buy a poster of this movie so I can viciously abuse it. I haven't seen Quiz Show, but out of the 4 Best Picture noms I have seen, they're all good except for Gump. And Gump is the one that won. Even people who love all 3 of these movies, which is most people, will admit that this one is the worst. Wait a minute, why don't I just rant about Forrest Gump in his own section? Forrest Gump is the bad movie in the Oscars of the Oscars. It was a smash success at the Oscars. Got nominated for 13 awards. 13! How does that happen? How did this excuse for a movie get nominated for Best Picture, Best Director, Best Actor, Best Adapted Screenplay, Best Film Editing, Best Visual Effects, Best Supporting Actor, Best Original Score, Best Cinematography, Best Art Direction, Best Makeup, Best Sound Mixing, and Best Costume Design? It won 6 of them. It won Best Actor, Best Director, Best Adapted Screenplay, Best Film Editing, and Best Visual Effects. What the f*** you fools about the visual effects in Forrest Gump deserves an Oscar? Where does the film even have any effects? Where? What? How? This is insane. We had one of, if not the best year in film history, and the Oscars blew it. So crazy to think that if this year happened again, Forrest Gump still would have gotten a nomination, but it would not have won. This is a segment I added in because I thought it was actually really interesting. In 1994, people were frothing at the mouth for Forrest Gump and Pulp Fiction. And Shawshank Redemption was just kind of there with the third wheel. But now, things have changed dramatically. Over the years, Pulp Fiction and Forrest Gump have kind of rotted in the public eye. Of course, a lot of people still love these movies to pieces. But a lot of people have turned on them, saying they were overrated, or that they haven't aged well, or that they're just fine. I mean, for Pulp Fiction, the most popular review on Letterboxd gives it a 6 out of 10. Meanwhile, The Shawshank Redemption has thrived in the public eye. Aged like fine wine, is more beloved than ever. Number 1 on the IMDB Top 250 since 2008 without ever moving. That is 17 years at number 1. 17! That is that crazy. Also number 8 on the Letterboxd Top 250. And no one in any shape or form has ever dared to say they dislike this movie. In fact, everyone loves it more than ever. The roles have completely turned. Back then, everyone adored Pulp Fiction, Forrest Gump, and they liked Shawshank. Nowadays, Shawshank's in the lead by a country mile. I think that is really interesting. I mean, when I started this video, I didn't plan to include any of this. I just think it's really, really interesting. The Vignettes Vignettes Trilogy of 1994 are some of the most interesting films to me. Two of my favourite films of all time, and one of my least favourite films of all time. Anyone who said that Forrest Gump is Robert Zemeckis' best film is immediately wrong on the basis that Back to the Future exists. I think the Vignettes structure is just a really fascinating one. Not having a quote-unquote proper plot just seems interesting even though it's anti-traditional. Even if a large part of me loves regular plots, I mean, Shawshank Redemption is my favourite movie, so this format should probably be more common. Especially because just not many of these movies have been made since. I mean, of course there have been some, like off the top of my head, Lady Bird and Glorious Bastards, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, and that's about it. Which is extra depressing considering that 2 of the 3 films I just listed are from the same guy who did Pulp Fiction. I'm sure there is, and I'm just being dumb. I'll upload this video and then kick myself because I just thought of several thousand more. Anyway, before I go, time to say, subscribe to my channel. I'm trying to upload every Tuesday. Follow me on Blue Sky at ForteRaffie. Follow me on Letterboxd, also ForteRaffie. And check my community tab, I post a ton of updates there. My next video is going to be on 28 years later and what I consider it a masterpiece. I'm telling you this because I want to tell you what my next video is going to be at the end of all my videos so that you know what to expect. Don't take anything I said in this video too seriously because it's all my opinion and I'm stupid. I would say we're all mad here, but I haven't used my Cheshire Cat sprite all video, so I need to think of a new outro, so I'm going to go think of that.